Secret Honor was made in 1984. It was a representation of a stage play in which Philip Baker Hall, Mr. Bookman on the Jerry Seinfeld show, that's how most of you will know him if you know who he is, which was an absolutely hilarious episode. But Mr. Hall portrayed Mr. Nixon for a 2-hour movie, and he was the only person you ever saw on screen. He was the only one with any dialogue. That's it. I guess there were some parts in the movie where there might have been somebody else on the screen, but I don't think there were speaking parts. I don't remember. I had seen the movie before. I watched it a couple of days ago. I saw the whole movie with him. Then I watched which was roughly, I think, an hour and a half, 2 hours. I think it was an hour and 30 minutes. But anyway, it is what it is. And then I watched the commentary with Robert Altman, who's one of our greatest directors. And then the commentary with the writer. And then there was about another 45 minutes of extras on Criterion. So it was like a 5 or 6 hour commitment. And I watched them all. I think it was spread out over, I don't think I finished it. I think I watched it during the evening and then some in the morning. But it didn't take a couple of days. It's pretty easy. Mr. Nixon, or President Nixon, is the first president I remember being elected and then leaving. I remember Mr. Johnson. I remember President Johnson, but I don't remember him being elected. I vaguely remember him. When I was 8 years old, Mr. Nixon was elected, and I remember it. I remember where I was. I remember seeing it on TV. I remember Hubert Humphrey, who was the vice president, saying, "I lost the election," and I spoke to the TV, and I said, "No, you didn't lose. You finished second." Because George Wallace was third. And by the way, Wallace won some states. That was a three-way election. A lot like Mr. Perot, but Mr. Wallace actually won states. He was a governor, and that's a whole nother story. So the movie, Mr. Hall doesn't really look like Nixon, but he was a stage actor. He lived to be almost 90 years old, and his impression of Nixon is just very good. The way he acts, the way he presented himself. The movie has a lot of cussing, and it explains a lot about history. And I learned a lot about my own history from the movie. I learned a lot from it. It was a very good experience watching it. Mr. Altman had one of the best commentaries I've ever heard. He explained how the movie was made, how it was taken to the University of Michigan, and he shot it in like 2 or 3 weeks. The whole movie was shot in 2 weeks. They just put on a stage play. He asked for volunteers. The students helped him. They put it on in a hall, and they filmed it. It was very simple, and it made good money in 1984 because Mr. Nixon was still alive when the movie was made, and people were still interested in that. That was less than 20 years after the events had happened. It was less. It was a little over 10 because Mr. Nixon was kicked out in 76, and it was in 84. It was only 8 years later. So I'm sure there were many people who saw it as an abomination, as it was terrible. I didn't see it that way. I think that there was just a lot to it in what this man went through. Nixon was the first president from California. It was the first president that I remember being impeached. There was an impeachment Mr. Lincoln's vice president was impeached. And I was impeachment just means they brought you up on charges. It doesn't mean that you're kicked, that you leave your office. Like Mr. Clinton and Mr. Trump have both been impeached, from my understanding. But Mr. Nixon was actually left office, and my memory of it was that people were glad he had gone. People saw him as a crook. People were tired of him, and the press pretty much beat him up. Now, a couple other things that I want to say is that Paul Craig Roberts, who was another guy that I made a video about a few days ago, he has said that he was run out of office because he was against the war, and that it was a conspiracy, and that Nixon really didn't do anything that anybody else hadn't done. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and a lot of people also at the time said they didn't know anything about Watergate, and that all the other presidents had done the same thing. So I'm just saying that emotionally we were tired of him. We were tired of the whole affair. And this movie was a great way of revisiting it. So the secret honor part was that Mr. Nixon left his office because he wanted to give honor back to the country, and he didn't want anybody to know about it. That was the point. Okay. Take care.